Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whenever you may be tuning in to the Growing Our Future podcast. Hey, we always like to say thank you. Thank you because, time's the only thing you can spend. You can't save it, you can't put it in the bank for later. You can only spend it. So the fact that you're willing to spend a little of your time with us, I just want you to know we appreciate it. The other thing I like to tell people is if agriculture's taught me anything, it's taught me if you want to know what the future is, grow it. So the Growing Our Future podcast is just about that, bringing on guests that can pour into us, that can share their ideas, their experiences, their insights, so that we may find some seeds that we can plant in our lives that will grow an even better tomorrow. And today is no different. Wait till y'all meet this lady. I'm excited to have her. She's the first ever teacher of the year that I've ever had on the podcast. And we'll talk about that just in a second here, but she did receive that honor in 2016. But we have Catherine Villarreal. Kat, let me make sure I make it right. Do you want me to call you Kat or Catherine?
Cat's fine. Cat's my childhood nickname. So
All right.
Catherine to my mother, but Cat to you. That's fine.
Very good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is Kat Villarreal. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, Kat, every person that's on this podcast, we start every podcast with the same question. Are
Hmm.
you ready?
Yes.
What are you grateful for today?
I am grateful for, and I always say grateful and blessed for where I am in my life. One of the things that I really sit back and look at now that I'm older is I always it sounds cliche, but was praying to be where I am. And when we get into talking through some of the stuff, I'll cover it. Is I like to remind people I'm not the typical agricultural person. I didn't grow up on a farm. I didn't have ranch experience. I started in high school and I just fell in love with it. And that has opened so many doors for me to get to the life that I had. I remember dreaming and scheming and thinking of one day being an ag teacher, one day having what I have now with my husband with our cattle operation. And I know 10-year-old me that was a ballerina and in cheer and never really thought about it would be like, wow, we got to do that. Like that's our life now. So I'm very grateful and blessed for what I've been able to earn and become through agriculture.
Wow. Okay, we can stop right there. That was good. No, that was really good though, because seriously, think about that. I agree with everything you just said too, by the way. One of the things that I like to tell people when you're on the podcast or when they're listening to the podcast is practice R2A2. You might share this with your kids. R2A2. Recognize,
Mhm.
relate, assimilate, and apply. Recognize what somebody
Okay.
says, try to relate to it, take it in, and then apply it. And
Mhm.
already, just in your gratefulness, you shared aspirations as a young person, the fact that you've worked hard for something, the fact that you appreciate that you're getting to live the dream that you had. All of that already is a great start. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. I
I
appreciate it.
I know that before we got started, you and I were talking a little bit about what you do. And so, why don't we start there? And why don't you take us kind of on a journey of kind of where you started, which led you into the role that you have now? Because something tells me you did not just fall into that chair. Something tells me that there was a
It's been a
journey
lot.
that took place. So,
Yes.
walk us through that. Tell us how you got to where you're at today.
So, like I said it before, I was not a typical agricultural person. I don't know what the right term would be, but um, I had the here and there experiences. I learned, and it's so crazy because my mom always brings it up. She never really realized what an impact this was going to be in my life. I started in high school, like I said, my all my parents or both my parents are educators. So at the time, that was when dual enrollment became a thing. And there was a lot of campuses down here in the valley that were starting their programs. One of them being Progresso High School, which is where my mom worked for 32 years. So my eighth grade summer, that program took off and she kind of made the executive decision. She said, you know what, you're not going to go to Wesco High with all your friends. You're going to move to Progresso with me. And those that are familiar with Progresso, there is a very big difference between Wesco and Progresso. Um, and it was a culture shock. I had always been around the town because my mom had worked there forever, like long, long time. She retired 33 years later. But I was like, okay, after I had my moment, I said, you know what, I'm going to go to school there. The dual enrollment program you say is going to be good for me. I'll try it out. So we went through the dual enrollment program. I started going with them to South Texas College. And it was really unique because we were like the guinea pigs. We were the first 25 students to go through the program. Wow. So we would attend like actual college classes on campus. They'd bus us to and from. And we went fall, spring, and summer one. So I started taking college classes my eighth grade summer. And at the time it was a lot, but I pushed through. And it was really hard on me because I also did cheer. I did a lot of extracurricular activities. And one of the things that I got interested in through my high school best friend was she's like, hey, you have the morning block open. Why don't you take an ag class? And I was like, what is an ag class? I don't know what that is. And she's like, it's about agriculture, but you'll be fine because we can take it together. And high school girl mentality was like, okay, bestie time. We'll be great. And so I enrolled in that ag class and I met my ag teacher, Mr. Gary Dominguez. And it kind of was just like a light switched on. I've always been very vocal, I had the leadership skills, I think, for like cheer and dance. And I was in GT. So I had like the brains. I just didn't put it to any other potential other than school. And I started to get involved. I always say, bless his dear heart, because he had a chapter full of girls, high school girls, that he had to wrangle. And we weren't crazy, but we were a lot. And he would take us anywhere and everywhere. He became like a second father figure to me. My parents now, they always talk about how grateful they are for him. He's a great family friend of ours now. And it was something that I just started to do. And my mom says I have the oldest daughter syndrome. Like I just kind of have a little bit of extraness to me when it comes to leadership stuff. And I never really asked her to do stuff. I just said I'm going to. So he gave me the opportunity to show rabbits. I had no idea what you do when you show rabbits, but he walked us through it. And I made sale at our county show and I was hooked. I was like, okay, this is cool. Like I'm good at this too. And so I started running for office. I started doing contests. And I just became super saturated in everything it is. And I became very, very close with him, like a right hand, learned a lot of his tips and trades. And then he told me about where he went to school. He's like, I went to the University of Kingsville. They have an ag ed program. And I said, okay. I said, that sounds great. I said, I want to do that. So went as far as to like plan out my schedule. We looked at things online. Now my mom is going to correct me when she hears this, but this is honest truth. She was not ready to let go. Her plan for me, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I just didn't know what type. And then it clicked. I said, I want to be an ag teacher. And she's like, but you can stay here and go to UTRGV and be close to home and all of this. And she's like, and you still have to finish like your bachelor's. You're not done with your associates. Because I was also working towards that still. And so she ended up saying like, no, like you're going to wait. I'm not sure. And it crushed me because I had this all planned out in my head. Like I was ready to go. And so she's like, let's finish at UTRGV and then I'll see how I feel about you going in the spring. So I started that plan and they realized you already have your associates. There's nothing else you can do here. I said, well, great. That's awesome. So I took like a mini summer off, I guess, or fall off. And I continued to work towards that. I said, you know, Mom, this is what I really want to do. She said, okay, if you want to do that, I'm going to relinquish you. So we got all my stuff transferred to Kingsville. I ended up going in like as a sophomore, junior.
Wow.
And I kind of just got dumped headfirst into everything. And I took it all in. I took my animal science classes. I got all of that stuff done. And I just became really, really excited about agriculture. And I was so excited to share a lot of it with my ag teacher. He guided me through everything. And it was just something that really opened my eyes because I knew what agriculture was from our small chapter, but seeing that it was people's jobs, like this is what they
Mm.
do,
Hmm.
it amazed me. And I was one of the youngest in our group. And I was able to go get mentored at a lot of the big schools at the time, like Orange Grove. I did observation at
Mm.
Orange Grove. They were a machine, like
Hmm.
they still are a machine, but got to see them train teams and run a program. And then I worked under Frances Nelson at Cal Allen.
Yes.
And I tell everyone, she was the one that taught me that ladies can be a boss. Um, I went in when she was having her last daughter,
Mm.
and the first day, because I started in January, mid Nueces County heat, she was very heavily pregnant. Like she was getting ready to go maternity leave, and there she is pushing steers through the chute. And I was like, you know what? I can do that. Like if she's pregnant and doing all this stuff, I'm okay. Because I was still kind of nervous because you get to meet all those people in college. You're like, my grandpa's had a ranch for 50 years. And I'm like,
Right.
I live
Right.
in a neighborhood and I have 3 dogs. Like that was my closest tie. All my experience was through my little county and stuff like that. And so I learned a lot with Francis and through that program. And I really that got me ready to go. So I graduated when I was 20. I tell my kids now is like I love dual enrollment, but I didn't live the college you see in on
Mm.
TV. I was so, and I think it made me the teacher I am today because I was so hyper focused because I was ready to go. I only had
Right.
so many hours I
Right.
could do. And so I graduated at 20 and I started looking for a job, which I wanted to move back home. I knew I wanted to be close to home. And I always tell everyone I had to GPS my way to my first job because I never heard of the town before. I think you're familiar with it because I feel like I've seen you post from Port Mansfield before.
Yeah.
But my first job was in San Perlita, Texas, population 501, like very small. And my ag teacher had heard about the position and he's like, I think you should apply. And I said, it's a single teacher department. What do you want me to do? Like, I had just mentored under one of the biggest programs with 4 other teachers. He's like, no, you'll be fine. Apply. So I GPS my way, go to the interview, and I just remember pulling up and I was like, wow, there's literally one light in this town. There's no Starbucks, there's no gas stations, there's no McDonald's. Like it's 20 minutes from anything. And if you're going to Port Mansfield, you'll miss it. People, I always tell people, you know, the blinking light where you can turn left, that's where we were. I interviewed, I got the position, and I think I'm the first female ag teacher they had, and they're probably the youngest.
Wow.
And I kind of went to work. And I always tell teachers that are starting out, you have to start somewhere and you got to learn somewhere.
Mm.
And so I learned a lot with my kids. I got hired 1 week later. I was taking these kids to state convention, had never met them before. We loaded them in a van. I'm only a few years older than a lot of these kids. So we grew together. And my San Perlita chapter is one of my favorite chapters that I have in my life because it was 8 years of me growing myself in a program. And so it's a really small county, Willacy County. We got in there and I followed a very tenured teacher. So it was scary because that guy had been there forever. And I started to get to work. We did a lot of the leadership stuff. We opened those doors to kids to do contests. It was a big show community, so I learned a lot about other show species. I showed pigs through high school, but I learned to do different things with the different animals, like the goats, the lambs. I had to. I was the only teacher. So it was a lot of trial and error. And that's something I always tell people, don't be scared to try. You mess up one time, you can figure it out, you learn from it. And it was a really good experience for me because I got to do everything. I taught shop, I did horticulture, I did that livestock classes, I did all of the SAE projects with the animals, and even doing like the leadership. That was something that I feel like I left my mark there with that because those kids only knew show. They didn't know
Mm-hmm.
what else FFA has to offer. And I feel like that's where some chapters are at a disadvantage because it's not just about livestock, it's about the leadership that you get from being an FFA member. You got to take advantage of everything. And so we ended up I really loved it there. It was my favorite, like I said, my favorite chapter in my history. And we had kids that I took my first team to state there. My livestock judging team placed fourth at area. We made it to state. That was like one of my top tier you made it moments. And my ag teacher was even like, damn, like you haven't even been teaching that long. That's not fair. And I was like, well, I was a nerd. We put the work in, we got it done. We had a lot of mentorship that helped get there. I got to experience a lot of firsts with them, all my firsts, but I went to national convention with one of my girls. I don't know if you remember way back when, God, I don't know what year it was. She was the talent contestant at state convention that sang Selena.
Yes. Yes.
Carson, that was my kid.
Wow.
Yes, she was one of mine, and she won state, and we went to national convention. She competed at nationals, so she gave me that opportunity,
Wow.
and it was a really good experience with that. And so it started to grow into a monster, I say, because it our program got so popular. There was only so much to do there, but it became a very big project. And I got the opportunity from one of the teachers that moved to IDEA. She said, look, this is what we're trying to do. It's at a charter school, but I think you'd be a good fit for the program. So she invited me in. I interviewed, I got a position, and we started working together to build this program. She moved on to another school because she got an opening at her hometown chapter. And I said, understood. That's an opportunity of a lifetime to teach where you grow. And so it kind of left me in a space where I was very nervous because IDEA did not know what they were doing. They were relying on us to kind of build this program. They knew what they wanted, but the work had to be put in.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So I started putting my head down and getting to work with a group of eighth grade kids that knew nothing about agriculture but what I've ever told them. And I told myself, you need to make them fall in love with it like Mr. D made you fall in love with it. And so we talked about it in class. I told them, I said, this is a 2-year commitment. If we're going to charter, I need you guys on board. And so they said, okay, we're ready. So it was 5 girls, 5 eighth grade girls. And we went through the process of chartering, and it's 15 steps. You got to meet all your deadlines. I was dealing with Gwen, who was a godsend. And then it came time to the site visit. And they said, okay, they're going to send the big wigs from FFA to see if you guys got it. And I said, okay, how do we prepare? And they're like, well, just touch these touch points, which I feel is like a test to you to see what you can do. And so I said, okay, we got to hit XYZ girls. And she's like, but you can't help them. They have to know the knowledge. They have to put together the presentation. I was like, okay, great. So we grinded. Those 5 girls really worked at it. We learned everything. We competed in everything. And we kind of shook it up because we were the first IDEA to get that program going. And in our inaugural year, we had a really good run. We had one of our 8th graders end up being a top 5 in the state in finalists for Spanish Creed as an 8th grader.
Wow.
That was wild. She was officially the youngest contestant that year, and everyone's like, are you lost? I said, no, she's going into semifinals heat. But she ended up top 5. And then we also were top 4 in the area for horse judging and went to state that year. So we hit state 2 years in our first year. It was a very powerful moment, but it was also scary because I was like, oh no, what are we doing? But we chartered, and it's just been hitting the ground running from there. We've grown to be from 1 ag teacher to we're at 4 now with about a little under 350 members, and we've just been moving and grooving since.
So it's called IDEA.
Yes, it's through the IDEA Public School System.
And it's a charter school.
Yes, sir.
And you started with 1. Now you're
yes, sir.
up to 4.
Yes.
And you started with 8 kids. Is that what you said?
So we had 8th graders. So they were in 8th grade.
Okay.
I've been having a moment all week because we started back to school. They're juniors now, but they were we're the Aggies also. That's our school mascot. So they're my founding Aggies. And my principal's like, okay, here's your principles of ag class, go. And so I taught the basic principles of ag class to 8th graders who had never been in ag. It's a very urban place where I'm at. We're kind of between Mission and Mission and Palmview. But I had to fuel those kids to understand what FFA was. and what all they have to do. And it's a very heavily Hispanic area. So when we first started out, I got the typical, like, we don't look like them. This isn't us. And I always tell them, I joke with them because my mom's Hispanic, my dad's white. I'm like, I'm half offended, but I feel you, so I understand. And so I said, if we're gonna join them, we're gonna beat them.
There you go.
And so
Nice.
we got into it, and we've
Nice.
been very competitive ever since. I've raised little monsters because now they feel like they're the best at everything. But I'd rather them be confident and wanting to try, because I've learned also to never turn them away from a contest. We're gonna try everything and figure it out.
Well, I mean, that's life, right? You're
Mhm.
helping them understand that it's a big world out there,
Yes,
and
sir.
you don't need to be afraid of it. And the other thing that I like is Dr. Gordon Davis. He's the gentleman that made the big contribution to Texas Tech, ICEV. They named, it's the Davis College of Agriculture now. But I
Yes, sir.
love what Dr. Davis says. He tells everybody it's okay to win. It's okay to win. And I think it's great that you're willing to tell your kids it's okay to win. Nobody's handed it to you, nobody's given it to you. You're going to earn it. But guess what? If you earn it, it's okay to win.
And they've really enjoyed it. They've become super competitive, and it made me happy because when we first started, a lot of them were like, "Well, I don't, no soy de rancho," which is what they would say, like, "I'm
Yeah,
not from the farm,
right,
I'm not from a
right,
ranch." And I said, "Neither am I." I said, "I lived in a neighborhood. I had to buy my first show shirt in high school to show my pig because I had never done a livestock show." And so I said, I'm the same as you. I'm not come from any kind of big corporation of agriculture or history.
right,
I wish I
right.
did. And so it kind of relaxes and eases them in, because that was my first thought when I first moved there. I said, we're at a disadvantage because it's not a school set up for an ag program. We didn't have a facility. Um, it was just a typical school. We're in an urban area. There's not a lot of farmland or anything around there for us to go off of. I'm going to have to teach these kids what agriculture is
Mm,
and teach them to love it.
mm.
And they truly have fallen in love with agriculture. And it's just so crazy to see those eighth graders now as juniors, where they're at and what they're capable of. Two of those girls that started with me in eighth grade have become district officers. They both want to go on track to be area officers. It's just, there's been a lot of growth, and I'm starting to see the hard works
Right
of what
on.
we did. Mm-hmm.
So, for the people that are listening, you're hearing this incredible conversation and you're hearing about South Texas. I want to kind of put that in context for people that are not familiar with South Texas.
Yes.
A lot of times people say, I say, have you ever been to South Texas? They said, yes, I've been to San Antonio. And I said, now wait a second. I said, let me help you understand that from San Antonio to Progreso, which is where Kat's at, right? From San Antonio down that far is right at 4 hours. It's right at 260 miles. Now, to put this in even more context, from where I live in North Texas to Progreso is 9 hours. It's over 600 miles. And so when we talk about South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, the Grandissimo Valle, you're talking about a stretch of land that goes right along the Texas-Mexico border. And it's just lined with all of these great cities, McAllen, Weslaco, Mercedes, Donna, all the way down. It just goes all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And it's just an incredible part of Texas. If you've never experienced it, I highly recommend it. It's just a special place. And I love talking about the valley because I've enjoyed so much getting to know the people, the culture, the food, the La Familia, the family connection. Um, so I think all of that is important because when we're listening to you describe your students and describe some of those mental hurdles that they may have to get over, they have to have a mentor that helps them see beyond the city limits, that sees beyond the county. And I think that's kind of what you're lending to their discussion is you're helping them see a bigger world view.
And I had ever put it into perspective until we started to expand and leave. A lot of my kids have never been outside of the valley.
Correct.
When I love the valley also because something I've learned to love being in that part, because obviously I'm from the valley, but we are also the citrus capital,
Right.
where you find all of your citrus, it's probably come from down here. And so I started to tie those connections to kids, and I didn't realize just how much we were opening doors until we started to go to different events. Some of the only times my students have been out of the valley have been with FFA. We've traveled to Texas A&M. We've traveled to Texas Tech. They love Texas Tech, by the way. But they had never been past McAllen. They had never seen outside of the valley. And I really enjoyed opening those opportunities to them because now I smile and smirk when they talk to other kids. Because, like, yes, that one time I went to tech and we judged horse judging. Like, they think they're the coolest things now because they've seen so much. But for some of my students that have never experienced anything like that, for them now to be like, I think I can go to school here. Like, that's where I'm like, okay, we're doing something right. They can see what they can do. Not that nothing's available for them in the valley,
Sure.
but I wanted them to open doors and I wanted them to see what they're capable of.
Man, that's good. That's real good. So as we unpack and listen to all this incredible growth that you've had personally, professionally, and with your kids, let's kind of pivot that right into if you were going to coach a kid right now and you're so passionate about agriculture, what opportunities are there in agriculture?
Like I mentioned before, I always tie back to being open. And one of the biggest blessings I have in my life is the fact that I didn't grow up in agriculture, but now my life revolves around it. I had mentioned before, or I haven't mentioned it yet, but my husband's also an ag teacher. So we're a family of ag teachers.
So you were telling me a little bit about your husband and go ahead and keep going from there.
Yes, sir. So he's also an ag teacher. We met in college going through the ag science program there at Kingsville. And I've learned how important support is through him because he's been there so much throughout my whole entire career. We started dating outside of me first getting my first job. He was always there for me when I was learning the ropes because he grew up in a family that was agriculture based. He grew up with his family owning a cattle business, which was always a dream of mine because I said I lived in a neighborhood, didn't have access to that. So he's really taught me all the things that it takes and the hard work to own and run a program. So his support has showed me what opportunities can provide to people. Just knowing that you have somebody in your corner and knowing that there's always someone there to cheer you on and help you and teach you what you need to know. He's always taken the time, and I think that's something that people need to do more of is to teach not only his students but myself and really just show me that everybody's capable of anything. You just have to try. And so he was one of my biggest supporters, and he's helped me get through and do a lot of what we do as a chapter. And so he's also taught me looking for opportunities for students. And we've been able to figure out and find things that are available to our students and fit their specialties. So we've figured out the opportunities that open when you are a good speaker, things, learning those leadership skills that are super important to not just being successful in a contest, but just being a good person. I think the FFA does such an amazing job of that because it teaches you those real life world skills. I feel like every coach says that they're teaching them lifelong skills, and every teacher says they're teaching them lifelong skills. But I think this organization goes above and beyond when it talks about molding our students. Something my principal always says is I can tell our students from typical IDEA students right away because our kids know how to shake a hand. They know how to talk to adults.
Wow.
They know how to advocate for themselves. They've done so much advocating for themselves in growing our chapter. And she says, you don't see that. You don't see that in students outside of this organization. And so I've learned that that opens a lot of opportunities. It's not who you know, it's what you can do and what you bring to the table.
And success begets success. So
Yes.
by teaching those kids those little things, they have success. And
Yes,
they're
sir.
like, wow, I had success. Well, maybe I can have it over here, or maybe I can pursue it over here. And then the other thing that I like that you're doing, one of my favorite quotes from Tony Robbins is he says, success leaves clues. And I love that because your success, you're leaving clues for them. Their success, they're now leaving clues for the kids that are following in their footsteps. And it's just going to keep getting better and better and better. So, talk leadership with me. If you could give a
Okay.
kid three leadership skills and say, here are three skills to be successful in life, what would they be?
Number one is confidence. That's something that I lacked and I still lack at times. And that's why I say support is so important because my I am very much an overthinker when it comes to things, and that's what limited me sometimes when it comes to putting myself out there. And I kind of have to put myself in a mindset like my husband says, you've got this, you can do it. Just try it. Just try it. And so I have to put myself out there in a lot of ways. And I think kids need to have that confidence. It's not being cocky.
Right.
It's not saying you're better than everyone else. It's just having the confidence in yourself to just take that chance with yourself. Do what you need to do. So confidence, I feel, is key. And I've humbled my kids a lot because I said, you know what? You're not better than anyone. You're just good. You got to be better. You can always be better.
Mhm.
And we always look for opportunity to grow. So confidence is one of my best ones. I also think a good leadership skill to have is going to be responsibility. With roles comes a lot of responsibility. And I've learned that as I've gone through my career is you start to get offered things like you said because you're successful. Like, you know what, you'd be great at this. You do this, and so it's a lot of responsibility, and it's making sure that you're able to not only be responsible for yourself, but if you're leading others, you need to be a good leader in that set. So being able to manage all the things you need to manage and be responsible for that, I think responsibility is a big leadership skill to have. The other one I would have to say is going to be vulnerability. I think that you need to be open to the ideas of others because there's not always going to be, your path changes, right? Like you said, you find clues to what you want to do. And just the change that I've seen in students has made me realize they're very vulnerable with me because they don't know what we're doing. I tell them to get ready for a contest. We're leaving in the morning. They're going to jump in and if they figure it out, they figure it out. But I say, be open to it. Like a lot of them, I always use my Spanish Creed, eighth grade Spanish Creed contestant as my example when I talk about this because she was a EB student, meaning Spanish was her first language.
Right.
She wasn't the most confident when I got her, but she wanted to be active. And she comes from a part of Mexico that has a very heavy diction. So, me naturally, I was like, you know what? It's going to be a challenge because number one, it's your second language. You're still learning English. Number two, you're going to have to overcome that part of your life, right? And so I said, you know what? What about Spanish Creed? I said, you speak beautiful Spanish. I said, let's take advantage of this. Let's be vulnerable and look at it together.
Nice.
And so I gave her the creed. She got the creed down, and it was just like a duck to water. Like I can listen to her say the creed every day. She just
Wow.
has it was her passion, and they got her to that top 5 spot as an eighth grader. I never thought I would have that to be able to say that we had a top 5 student in our first year chartering. So that kind of opened her doors to be vulnerable to other opportunities. Now she's our chapter president. She's a district officer. She
Wow.
wants to go to school to become an agricultural recruiter. She wants to work in agriculture. And this is a little girl, if she never was vulnerable, would not have that opportunity that she has now. So, vulnerability, it sounds like a weakness to some, but I think you
No.
need to be open to ideas.
every good leader that I deal with and that I communicate with, that I talk with, these are the very conversations we have. Because if you're not willing to be vulnerable, then you might not be coachable. Being vulnerable opens you up to be coachable. And, sometimes you have to be willing to say, critique me. Tell me what I can do better. Tell me where I might have missed an opportunity. And if you're coachable, that being coachable is a sign of vulnerability. And most good leaders have that built into their DNA.
And it's been amazing to see her grow into that leadership role because she was a girl that didn't really talk a lot because she felt like she couldn't communicate. And
Mm.
to see her, she's told me, she's like, Miss V, like I wanted you, this is it. She's like, FFA is my priority. This is where I belong. And so she's been our biggest advocate for our students to see like if Jimena can do it, I can do it. And so she's in her district leadership role. I've been just so proud of her because I feel like sometimes those higher level officers have that reputation where it's like, oh, it's so and so whose daddy was an FFA and
Right.
they came from this such great stock, which doesn't take any away from the kid. But I feel like it means a little bit more when you come from somewhere like she does and you inspire those other kids, like my kids at Palmview, to do better.
Well, I appreciate so much of what you're sharing. Um, People ask me all the time about all the podcasts that I've done and the people that I've had the honor of interviewing and talking to, and they've been great. But I got to say, when I hear your story, when I hear Kat Villarreal's story, when I hear Justin Reyes' story, when I hear Archimedes Reyes' story, when I hear Lida Garcia's story, especially three of y'all, because y'all come from the Rio Grande Valley, it is very inspiring. It's inspiring because of some of the cultural norms that sometimes become barriers to taking risk, to stepping out, to trusting others, to finding those clues. And so when I hear y'all speak and I hear you and you're on your journey, I hope that teachers and students alike will hear and say, "Wow, if they do it, maybe we can do it too. If Kat can do it, and Della Stern has done it, who's on the foundation board, and all these people that are just extraordinary young leaders, if they can do it, why can't I do it?" And that's the reason I wanted you on the podcast. So, one of the things that I like to share with people is I always ask them, I said, how many high schools are in Texas? And they always joke, and somebody will say, a lot. Yeah, I said, there is a lot. So there's over 3,000 high schools in Texas. Now think about this, over 3,000 high schools. How many of them are going to have a graduating class this coming year? Every one of them. That means kids are going to be out looking for a job, a scholarship, or an opportunity. Question that I ask is, what's your competitive edge? What separates you from the competition? It could be exactly what you said a while ago. Firm handshake, look them in the eye, yes or no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. It could be the fact that you made a connection in Lubbock, Texas, which is miles from the Grandissimo Valle. It could be the fact that you went to Texas A&M and made a connection. It could be the fact that you went to Austin, Texas, or Waco. But the end of the day, students. So, Kat, what I appreciate, something else that you're saying, this is just my soapbox. I tell the adults, our job as adults, our job is to create opportunities. That's our job. And then I look at the kids and I said, your job is to determine the outcome. You're not entitled to anything. We're going to do everything we can to encourage you, equip you, and empower you. But at the end of the day, you've got to determine the outcome. You have to find your competitive edge. And I just think it's great that teachers like you are out there pushing these kids, telling them don't see hurdles, don't see boundaries, look for opportunities, work hard, be responsible, and get it done. And next thing you know, they could be the next podcast interview on the Growing Our Future podcast.
And it's I think competitive edge is such a controversial topic with kids these days because their idea of competitive edge is what they already have within them. Like, oh, well, I know this because I grew up doing this and whatever, that they feel like that entitles them to a competitive edge.
Right.
But seeing my kids come from nothing to
Mhm.
what they've done, you grow your competitive edge and you have to create it.
That's right.
And it's something that it's open to everyone. Like I always told my kids when we first started, I said everybody wears the same jacket. Everybody is where you're at. You are all on the same page. I said, how bad do you want it? You got
Amen.
to put yourself in the game. And it's just locking in and getting things done. And that's something that I've been very blessed to have so many mentors in my life that have shown me the opportunities. But it just means, and I know every ag advisor thinks their kids are the best, but my kids have come from nothing. And anytime we would go into scenarios where we're going to a state contest or an area contest, they have that minute, like every kid does, where they're like, "Oh no, what am I doing?" And I said, "You're meant to be here. You need to get to work,
Sure.
do what you need to do."
Right.
And they've made my career what it is. And I take no credit other than just being that ag teacher that's there to not let them turn around, because I said I was you. I I know what it's like to feel like you didn't come from your sister showing livestock all your life. Your first contest was a district contest. You never knew anything about it. And that's my favorite part of watching them grow, is because when the history and everything comes down to it, people on paper can be like, wow, these kids are so successful. But it's like, if you only knew that they had no idea what FFA was before they took an ag class, you would be amazed.
Well, I mean, life's not a solo project. You're helping them understand that. You're helping them that you have to be looking to know, like you said, you've got somebody there helping you build the confidence. You've got people that are willing to help you, but you've got to be looking. You've got to be working on developing your skills so that when the time comes to win, that you can win because you're willing to outwork somebody. That was your competitive edge. So that's why I say I enjoy these conversations so much. And they're not complicated conversations. These are not complicated ideas. It's like I tell people, it's what you got inside called want to. You got to have a little want to. And when you can find a person like you or a mentor or somebody that pulls that want to out of us, it's hard to stop somebody that's committed to greatness. So keep doing what you're doing. I just want to tell
Thank
you
you.
thank you. Okay, before we leave, you get one fun question. Everybody gets a fun question.
Okay, I'm ready.
Ready? What's the best concert you've ever been to?
The best concert I've ever been to. That's a tough one. Um, oh, I have to think about that one for a little while. Oh, I know what it is. Okay.
All right.
So the best concert I ever been to was actually my first concert. So this was back in the day I was in elementary school. And this is where I told my parents, I said, all the signs were there. Like I was meant to be a country kid. You guys just I was misplaced at birth or something. And because now my mom talks about it, she's always like, man, if I would have known you would have taken this seriously, I would have bought you that steer. I would have bought you a heifer. You would have been everywhere. And I said, you know what, mom, I think it makes my story even that much better, because I see all these people that are so successful and then they become ag teachers and they're just these powerhouses. And I sometimes I'm like, I'm not going to get there. But I'm like, it gives me that edge to show my kids, you know what, you can do it. And I love country music since I was little. And my favorite artist was Alan Jackson. I loved Alan Jackson. And he was coming to the Rio Grande Valley. And this was back in the day when you couldn't buy your tickets online and you couldn't do all that.
Right.
And I was begging my dad. I said, please, 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 I want to go. He's like, what do you want to go see? I said, I like country music. And my dad is a hardcore rocker, beach boy type vibe, which I love that side of me too, but country was where it was at. And he surprised me and he spent all day on the phone with Ticketmaster and bought me tickets to Alan Jackson. And it was my
Wow.
first concert I was ever going to go to. And I remember my dad buying the CD and he's like, okay, we got to know these songs. Like, I got to know them too. And so
That is
it
awesome.
became this kind of passion that we had together. And to this day, we fell in love with Alan Jackson together. And it was just him and I. It was my first like thing me and my dad did alone. He took me to the concert And our song has always been the song Drive. And he says that that's our relationship because I did not want to let you go. I didn't want you to drive. And he's like, and now look where you've driven to, look what you've become. And so that is a very special moment to me. And it's not only it's my first concert, but it was the one that was most special to me because he's getting up there in age, we're getting up there in age, and he's always like, remember, that's the first concert I took you to. And he'll request that song when we're hanging out and barbecuing. And it's a very special tie to me.
It's beautiful. And I appreciate you sharing that. Um, and I know your dad's very proud of you.
Thank
And
you.
it's that's a beautiful connection that you have. I lost my dad when I was 10 years old and caused a lot of problems for me. I got sent to a boys' ranch because of it. But thankfully, God put other people in my life that kind of took on some of that role. But when I became a dad, I can tell you I've drugged my kids to everything. I've spoiled them. I've made them go to, they're, yeah, they've got to see more concerts than most kids see in a lifetime. But to your point, I did that because I want what you just described. And I hope one day my kids look back and say, you know what? I remember we got to do those things. And I hope they cherish them as much as you do.
And we had that conversation. It's funny that it comes up. We had that conversation just the other day because I'm older. I don't live at home, but I live near them. And me and my husband spend a lot of time golfing with him and stuff. And we were having lunch one time after a round, and he said, I gave you a lot of opportunities, right? And I was like, where's this coming from? And he's like, I was a good dad. I said, yes, you were a great dad. And he's like, I took you here. We did this. I said, Dad, it was never about where you took me. It was just the fact that we were doing things as a family. We did this together. And he's like, I just want to know that I did enough and I don't need to do anymore. And I said, no, I said, you're great. Like, you're retired, live your life. Like, you're good. But I think that's such a special connection is just the opportunities that your parents give you. They don't ever realize what they're doing. And I know it's something that you mold your children, but it's my parents always tell me we had no idea. Like we had no idea this is where you were gonna end up, but we're so thankful. They enjoy my lifestyle so much more now. My dad is a chancla cowboy, what me and my husband call him. He loves to come out to the ranch, and whenever we go out of town, he's like, I'll check the cows, I'll do all this. He eats it up. He loves it. So him and my husband, he's taught my husband's got to give him so many opportunities too, and it's just opened a whole new door to our family. Like we never thought that this was where I would end up. I always thought I knew I was going to be a teacher. I love that part. I love education, but being an ag teacher has made my life what it is.
Well, let me tell you, I'm honored to know you. I'm glad that our paths have crossed several times and that we were able to make this happen. And I appreciate you sharing your heart, your dreams, the challenges, but all these little steps along the way that have put you where you're at so that you can pour into the kids that are in your care. I find all that inspiring, and I want to wish you the best. And don't ever hesitate to call. If
Thank
we can
you.
ever be of assistance, we're always just one phone call away.
I appreciate it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for stopping by for the Growing Our Future podcast. You can see why I told you Kat was going to be a great interview. And I hope you found some seeds of greatness there. I sure did. And remember, we've got to plant them. If agriculture's taught me anything, if you want to know what the future is, grow it. You got to plant them. You've got to take care of them. You got to harvest them. And then you got to share them. And Kat just told us that entire story. And it was beautiful. So until we meet again, everybody go out, do something great for somebody. You'll feel good about it. And in the process, you might just make our world a better place to live, work, and raise our kids. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.